There comes a time in history, in family, in friendship, where your silence becomes a weapon, not against the enemy, but against the very ones you are called to protect. There is a pain that exists not because of what was said, but because of what was never said. When truth is absent and lies rule the room, your silence becomes a vote. You may think you're staying out of it, but in the court of injustice, quiet people become hidden allies of wrong. Silence has never been a neutral position. It is not a sanctuary of wisdom. It is a hiding place of fear. In the face of error, silence does not preserve peace. It permits destruction. And in the arena of moral conflict, silence is not innocence. It is alliance. You were not born to be a bystander in the face of chaos. There is no such thing as holy neutrality in a war between light and darkness. If you say nothing when deception is speaking, you allow it to become the loudest voice in the room. When the wicked rule, they do not need the support of the majority. They only need the silence of the righteous. They only need the good to go quiet. Because once the good stop speaking, evil can pose as wisdom, sin can wear the robes of compassion, and deception can masquerade as truth. Silence becomes dangerous when it is worn like a badge of diplomacy. You think your silence makes you wise, mature, or discerning. But in reality, your silence may simply mean you've lost your courage. The serpent loves silent saints. Hell does not fear those who know the truth. It fears those who are bold enough to speak it. And when you hold back what you know heaven has revealed, you have not protected peace. You have postponed purpose. Sometimes we hide behind personality, saying, I'm not confrontational, or that's not my place. But the truth is, we're not avoiding conflict. We're avoiding responsibility. We're afraid of the backlash, the misunderstanding, the labeling, the isolation. But you cannot preserve influence and obey God at the same time. If your voice was only for applause, then it was never anointed in the first place. You were given influence to confront, not to conform. You were given wisdom to rescue, not to retreat. In every generation, darkness does not need to increase. It only needs the light to remain hidden. And you cannot be light and be silent. Light speaks without speaking. It exposes simply by existing. When you remain silent, you are dimming the light. You are letting the shadows stretch across your territory, not because evil advanced, but because you refuse to shine. You must understand, silence is a language. It speaks volumes. It tells your children what matters. It tells your followers what is acceptable. It tells the oppressor that no one is watching. It tells the hurting that no one cares. Silence doesn't just fail to help. Silence strengthens the hands of those who do harm. Think of the prophets. Think of the apostles. Think of those who were burned, stoned, imprisoned, exiled, not for being wrong, but for refusing to be silent. They understood that neutrality is a myth, that to stand with God is to stand against something, and that to carry truth is to make noise in a world that thrives on lies. We are not called to be soft observers of suffering. We are not called to hide in spiritual safe zones while the world is ravaged by confusion. If your voice is only loud in worship but quiet in warfare, something is wrong. If your convictions only speak behind closed doors, but never in public spaces, your integrity is incomplete. We live in a world that wants to redefine truth, rewrite morality, and erase holiness. And every time you hold your peace while the enemy speaks lies, you are letting him write the story. You are letting him educate the youth, rewrite your family's values, influence your culture, and shape your church. And then did we get here? We got here because truth lost its voice when we chose silence in the name of civility. It is not enough to be inwardly righteous. You must be outwardly vocal. Because truth unspoken is truth unused. And unused truth is no different than no truth at all. Imagine a doctor who finds the cure for a disease but says nothing. Imagine a pilot who sees a storm ahead but keeps flying. Imagine a parent who sees danger and chooses not to warn. That's what silence becomes when you know what's right but say nothing. Your silence can cause more damage than your mistake, because mistakes can be corrected, but silence in the critical moment can cost lives, generations, destinies. You may think, it's not my responsibility. But responsibility doesn't always come by assignment. It comes by awareness. If you know you owe. If you see you're accountable. If God showed you the truth, He didn't do it so you could admire it in private. He revealed it so you could declare it in public. There is no such thing as silent salt. There is no such thing as hidden light. Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world. Salt that refuses to touch is useless. Light that hides itself is worthless. And a believer who refuses to speak is powerless. Don't say you're letting God handle it when God is trying to use you. Don't say, I'm staying out of it, when heaven already put you in the middle of it on purpose. You don't get to sit on the sidelines in a spiritual war. Either you speak up or you're spoken over. Either you declare truth or deception gets the final word. If your silence gives comfort to evil and confusion to the weak, then it is not silence. You do not need to yell, argue, or insult, but you do need to speak. Speak with wisdom, speak with grace, speak with clarity, but speak, because your silence is not harmless, it's harmful, it's not passive, it's participating, and it's not avoiding conflict. It's allowing casualties. In a time where lies wear the costume of love and truth is labeled as hate, the voice of the righteous must rise. You are not called to blend. You are called to break the silence. You are not called to be liked. You are called to be light. And light that is silent is darkness in disguise. Your voice carries deliverance, not because of who you are, but because of the assignment attached to your existence. You are not just flesh and breath. You are a living answer to someone's secret cry. There are people right now entangled in bondage, suffocating under the weight of lies and battling chains of depression, fear, identity, confusion, guilt, and generational cycles. And they are not waiting for a miracle from heaven. They are waiting for your voice. When God formed you, He deposited a portion of His solution into your mouth. What you've survived, what you've learned, what you've overcome was not just for your benefit. It was for your voice. Every battle you've come through wasn't just so you could walk out victorious, but so you could go back and bring someone else out. You carry keys in your testimony. You carry power in your words. There are chains that will never break until you speak. There are minds that will never shift until you open your mouth. Deliverance is not always about casting out devils. Sometimes deliverance begins when someone hears a truth that dismantles a lie they've believed for years. Sometimes deliverance looks like a word spoken in due season that unlocks an imprisoned identity. And sometimes deliverance flows through a voice that dares to confront what others are too afraid to name. God moves through voices. From Genesis to Revelation, every major move of God was preceded by a voice. He called creation into existence through voice. He delivered Israel through Moses' voice. He confronted sin through the prophets' voices. He prepared the way for Jesus through the voice crying in the wilderness. Even salvation itself comes by believing in the heart and confessing with the mouth. That means even heaven's greatest gift rides on the wings of spoken words. So why do you think your voice doesn't matter? Why do you believe that what you've been through disqualifies you from speaking? In fact, it's what you've been through that qualifies you. God has entrusted you with secrets, wisdom, pain, process, and power, and He has wrapped them inside your voice. But here's the tragedy: when the messenger remains silent, the message dies. That's the danger of fear. That's the cost of self-doubt. Every time you withhold your voice, you bury someone else's breakthrough. Your silence becomes the graveyard of miracles. There are people God has assigned to your sound, but if you never release it, they'll live and die thinking God forgot them, when in reality, the vessel just refused to speak. You are not just a person, you are a messenger. You are not just a believer, you are a carrier, deliverer, an agent of change. And your deliverance was never meant to end with you. You were saved to save, healed to heal, called to call others out. What you've walked through is the evidence of authority. You've faced rejection. Then your voice has the power to break shame off others. You've come out of addiction. Then your story carries the oil to set captives free. You survived abuse, betrayal, loss, abandonment. Then you've been given the sound of survival. And when you speak, hell remembers what couldn't kill you. The enemy's number one strategy is not always to destroy your life. Sometimes it's to silence your voice, because he knows your voice is dangerous. He knows that if you ever open your mouth with faith and truth, you will awaken people who've been sleeping. You'll stir up courage in the timid. You'll spark identity in the lost. You'll ignite fire in the weary. And the devil cannot afford for you to realize how powerful your voice really is. That's why he attacks your confidence. That's why he surrounds you with doubt. That's why he makes you overthink your story. That's why he reminds you of your mistakes, hoping you'll disqualify yourself. Because if he can keep you quiet, he can keep others bound. Your silence is not about you. It's about the generations tied to your obedience. God did not give you revelation to keep it hidden. He did not bring you through fire just for you to come out and sit silently. He didn't pull you out of Egypt so you could blend in with the wilderness. No. He called you out so you could call others out. You don't need a platform. You don't need a microphone. You don't need a stage. All you need is the courage to open your mouth when God stirs your spirit. The power is not in the perfection of your words. It's in the obedience of your sound. The anointing doesn't come from fancy vocabulary. It flows through surrendered vessels. If God used a donkey, He can use you. If God used fishermen, He can use you. If God used broken, unqualified, overlooked people in Scripture, why would He not use the same today? You have no idea how much healing your story holds. You have no idea how much deliverance is waiting on your voice. There's a young woman who won't know she's worthy until you say what you wish someone had told you. There's a young man who won't escape addiction until he hears your redemption story. There's a marriage that won't be restored until you share what God did in yours. There's a soul that won't believe God is real until you speak the testimony they didn't even know they needed. And what if you never do? What if you wait too long? What if you keep thinking someone else will say it? What if you think it's not your season? While you wait to feel ready, the people tied to your sound are still suffering. While you hesitate, the ones assigned to your courage remain in confusion. While you doubt yourself, they doubt God. But when you speak from the place of obedience, not ego, when you speak from the place of healing, not bitterness, when you speak from truth and not fear, deliverance is released like lightning. Don't let shame silence you. Don't let fear mute you. Don't let insecurity delay you. Your voice was not given to make noise, it was given to break chains. Speak, even if it trembles. Declare, even if your past still echoes. Testify, even if the wound still stings. Because your deliverance is someone else's doorway, and your voice is the key that unlocks it. It is not enough to know the truth. Truth in silence becomes treason. Revelation without responsibility is not spiritual maturity, it is spiritual negligence. What you carry on the inside, if not released, becomes dangerous not only to others, but to your own accountability before God. You are not just a student of truth, you are a steward of it. And heaven holds us accountable not for what we didn't know, but for what we knew and refused to say. The worst form of deception is not a lie. It's silence in the face of what's right. It's knowing exactly what's required, what's righteous, what's holy, what's healing, and choosing to say nothing while those around you walk in blindness, pain, and error. When you withhold truth under the banner of not my business, you have become complicit in the confusion. Your silence becomes agreement. Your silence becomes an invisible yes to the very thing you claim to oppose in your heart. You may think you're avoiding conflict, but you are cultivating destruction. You may think you're showing grace, but you are sabotaging destiny. What you refuse to confront, you empower. What you bury to keep peace will one day rise and create chaos. Hidden truth has never set anyone free. It only prolongs captivity and increases the damage. God never gives truth for private collection. He gives it for public transformation. You are not an archive, you are an agent. You are not a museum of revelation, you are a messenger. When truth comes into your life, it comes with an assignment. To carry it, to communicate it, to declare it with boldness, wisdom, and compassion, not to sit on it like a guarded secret. There are people suffering not because God has not spoken, but because His people have refused to repeat what they heard. Every time you silence your voice when you know what is right, you allow the enemy's voice to grow stronger. Truth that is hidden benefits no one, and heaven does not celebrate knowledge that is stored, it rewards knowledge that is shared. Remember the parable of the talents. The one who buried what he was given was not called faithful. He was called wicked and lazy. He didn't misuse it. He didn't break it. He didn't throw it away. He simply buried it. And for that he was judged. How many of us are burying truth? Not because we don't value it, but because we fear the cost of sharing it. The cost of being misunderstood. The cost of losing relationships. The cost of being called judgmental. The cost of being unpopular. But the kingdom was never meant to be convenient. Truth was never meant to be safe. The cross itself is proof that truth will cost you. Jesus didn't die because He was kind. He died because He wouldn't stay silent. His words disrupted religious systems, exposed hypocrisy, revealed motives, and called people out of comfort into repentance. He didn't just come to be nice. He came to declare truth, and His voice made demons tremble. You cannot follow Jesus and hide truth at the same time. You cannot say you walk in the light and then refuse to speak that light when darkness tries to take over. There is no neutrality in the kingdom. Either you are advancing truth or allowing deception. Either you are delivering people or letting them drown. And the most dangerous place to be is a silent disciple, full of knowledge, full of understanding, but empty of expression. You are accountable for what you know. God didn't reveal His word to you so you could feel special. He revealed it to you so you could make others free. If you understand grace, you are responsible to show it. If you've received healing, you are responsible to testify. If you've learned righteousness, you are responsible to teach. If you've been rescued from sin, you are responsible to warn others. If your eyes have been opened, you are responsible to open your mouth. Truth is not always easy to speak, but it is always required. You don't have to be harsh. You don't have to be rude. You don't have to be arrogant, but you do have to be obedient, because truth delayed becomes truth denied. And in a world drowning in opinions, preferences, and spiritual confusion, the clarity of truth is more precious than ever before. God is not impressed by how much scripture you know. He's moved by how much you live and release. The Pharisees knew the law but weaponized it. They memorized scripture but rejected the word made flesh standing in front of them. Why? Because their hearts were closed and their mouths were polluted with tradition, fear, and pride. They hoarded truth for power instead of releasing it for freedom. That is the tragedy of hidden truth. It becomes corrupted the longer you keep it to yourself. Every generation is shaped not just by what is said, but by what is refused to be said. Culture decays when truth becomes optional. Families fracture when no one speaks up. Churches lose power when they prioritize comfort over conviction. And destinies are derailed when the people who carry the truth refuse to carry their voice with it. One day you will stand before God, and He will not just ask you what you believe. He will ask you what you did with what He showed you. Did you speak it? Did you share it? Did you teach it? Did you live it out loud? Or did you protect your image at the expense of someone else's freedom? Heaven doesn't reward silence in the face of urgency. Heaven rewards faithfulness with the truth, no matter the cost. You are not called to be a vault of revelation. You are called to be a vessel, a trumpet, a witness. And a witness must testify. If God brought you through, say so. If God convicted you, speak it. If God showed you light, don't cover it. You may be the only light in someone's tunnel. You may be the last warning before someone steps off the edge. You may be the voice God wanted to use to wake them up. But if you say nothing, they may never hear it. And what excuse will you offer for your silence? That it was awkward, that it might offend, that it wasn't your role, that it was risky. Heaven does not excuse fear where faith was required. Heaven does not accept silence where obedience was demanded. To know and not to speak, that is not spiritual wisdom, that is spiritual betrayal. The cost of silence is never limited to a moment. It echoes into generations. When you withhold wisdom, you don't just delay progress, you rob the future. What you choose not to say today will be what your children have to fight tomorrow. And what you remain silent about in your time becomes the confusion, compromise, and captivity of those who come after you. Silence may feel safe, but in the eyes of heaven, it is a form of spiritual theft. You are stealing clarity from the next generation when you choose comfort over truth. God never gave you revelation just for survival. He gave it to you for succession. The wisdom you gained in pain, the lessons you learned in valleys, the insight that was born through years of tears, fasting, failure, and restoration, that was never meant to die with you. That was supposed to be passed down like fire from one torch to the next. But when you go silent, the flame goes out, and a generation walks in darkness, not because they were rebellious, but because no one spoke when it was time to teach. The enemy doesn't need to lie to the next generation if he can just keep the previous one silent. Satan's agenda is not always aggressive. Sometimes it's passive. He wins by simply convincing wise people to keep quiet, to mind their business, to let people find their own way. But silence is not protection, it is permission. When you keep your testimony to yourself, you allow the lie to become their reality. When you hide your story, your scars, your convictions, and your history, you may think you're shielding them, but you're really setting them up for cycles you could have broken. The Bible is not just a book of commands. It's a record of what God did. Over and over, God commands His people. Write it on the doorposts. Speak of it when you walk and when you lie down. Do not let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Why? Because heaven understands something we often forget. If it's not spoken, it's not transferred. And if it's not transferred, it has to be relearned through unnecessary pain. When one generation refuses to teach, the next generation is forced to guess. And guessing leads to error. You see, truth is not automatically inherited. It must be intentionally passed down. Righteousness is not contagious. It must be modeled, explained, and declared. Silence doesn't produce legacy. It produces confusion. The danger is not always in the noise of the enemy. Sometimes the danger is in the silence of the elders. The danger is in fathers who won't talk to their sons, in mothers who hide what they overcame, in preachers who refuse to tell the truth because culture might be offended, in believers who pretend they've never struggled and never sinned, so their children think they're the only ones broken. And instead of being drawn to God's mercy, they are pushed deeper into shame. The silence of the wise becomes the burden of the young, because silence makes it look like perfection is the standard instead of progress. Silence makes it look like we were always holy, always pure, always obedient, and that's a lie. We didn't get here by accident. We got here by the grace of God, by mercy that met us in the middle of our mess, by truth that confronted us in our rebellion, by voices that dared to speak when we didn't want to listen. So who are you refusing to speak to now? Who are you leaving vulnerable because you don't want to seem controlling? Who are you watching drift when your voice could anchor them? Not with rules, but with revelation. You may think they're not listening, but the seed still matters. Even if they reject it in the moment, your words become a marker in their soul. Truth has a way of sticking, even when it's ignored. But it must be spoken. If it's never released, it has no chance to take root. And what about legacy? What is the inheritance you're leaving? Is it just money, property, a last name? Or is it a path, a pattern, a voice that continues speaking even when you're gone? Because the greatest inheritance is not in the bank. It's in the bloodline of truth. It's in the wisdom that's been spoken, written, and deposited through intentional living. The greatest gift you can give your descendants is not a life of luxury, but a life of light, a clear sense of identity, conviction, an unshakable faith forged by the truth you chose to declare. What you are silent about, they will normalize. What you refuse to explain, they will redefine. What you hide, they will imitate in ignorance. If you do not set the standard, they will borrow one from the culture. If you do not tell your story, they will create their own. And it may be one of resentment, because they never saw your humanity, only your silence. This is why God told Joshua, meditate on this book day and night. Do not let it depart from your mouth, then you will be successful. Success wasn't just about knowing the word. It was about speaking it, teaching it, repeating it, because truth must be heard before it can be lived. Your silence has the power to bless or curse the future. You're not just protecting your own peace. You're shaping someone else's possibilities. And the future you're preparing for your children is not determined by your intentions, but by your declarations. What are you teaching when you say nothing? What are you preserving when you withhold the wisdom God gave you through the fire? Your pain has purpose, but only if you speak it. Your lessons have legacy, but only if you declare them. The wisdom you gain through warfare is supposed to become a weapon in your children's hands. But if you don't hand it to them, they'll fight blindfolded. And that is the price of silence. That is the cost of holding back truth because of pride, shame, fear, or apathy. We must realize the war we refuse to fight today will become the prison our grandchildren live in tomorrow. The lie we tolerate will become the truth they embrace. The standard we lower will become the norm they accept. If we are to be faithful, if we are to be righteous in more than name only, then we must be vocal, we must be honest, we must speak. Because silence is not just forgetting the past, it's forfeiting the future. You were born to be a voice, not an echo. You were not created to mimic, to blend in, or to disappear into the noise of the culture. You were not placed on this earth to copy trends, imitate opinions, or repeat what everyone else is already saying. There is a unique sound wrapped in your spirit, a divine tone encoded into your soul, and heaven is waiting for you to release it. You carry a frequency that hell cannot cancel, and that the earth is desperate to hear. But it will remain dormant until you refuse to echo and decide to speak as the voice you were born to be. Your silence is not humility, it's disobedience in disguise. Humility does not mean invisibility, it means surrender. And when God gives you a word, a conviction, a burden, or a revelation, keeping quiet is not being humble. It is being irresponsible with what He entrusted to you. Humility submits to the assignment. Disobedience hides behind personality, behind fear, behind false modesty and comfort. But no matter how you package it, when you refuse to be the voice God has called you to be, you are resisting heaven's purpose for your life. God did not place you in this generation to simply agree with it. He didn't give you discernment, wisdom, and spiritual sight so you could go along with the flow. He called you out of darkness to declare light. He didn't rescue you so you could whisper behind walls. He raised you up to roar on the front lines. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. And salt that stays in the shaker doesn't preserve anything. Light that stays under a bowl doesn't expose anything. A believer who keeps silent in critical moments does not protect peace. They delay deliverance. You were not born to be popular. You were born to be prophetic. You were not born to be accepted. You were born to be effective. And sometimes the most effective people are the most rejected ones, not because they're unloving, but because they dare to speak what others are too afraid to say. You must make peace with the reality that the voice God gave you may offend people who love the sound of lies. It may disturb people who are comfortable in compromise. It may irritate systems that thrive on silence and submission. But that doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're rising into your true identity. The reason the enemy tries so hard to muffle your mouth is because he knows what your voice can do. He remembers the last time God used a voice, and the Red Sea split. He remembers the time God used a voice, and fire came down from heaven. He remembers the time a voice shouted, and Jericho's walls fell. He remembers the time Jesus opened his mouth and said, "It is finished," and the power of sin and death was broken. Every move of God has always been accompanied by a voice, and every time a voice rises, hell trembles. You are not called to echo culture. You are called to confront it with truth. You are not called to echo pain. You are called to heal it with testimony. You are not called to echo confusion. You are called to carry clarity. Echoes are safe. Voices take courage. Echoes bounce back what they've heard. Voices break through with what they've received from heaven. Echoes rely on others to go first. Voices pave the way. Echoes fade quickly. But a true voice will outlive the moment, will ripple into eternity, will impact generations. That's why God put his word in your bones like fire. Because you weren't created to stay silent. Stop waiting for permission to be who heaven has already announced. Stop waiting for the crowd to approve what God already confirmed in secret. Stop waiting for the world to create a space for what you were supposed to take by boldness. You are not here to blend in. You are not here to sound like everyone else. You are not here to be politically polished while spiritually powerless. You are here to thunder with purpose. You are here to be the voice crying in the wilderness. You are here to carry sound from the throne, not trends from the timeline. There is a famine of truth in the land, not because God has stopped speaking, but because too many of his people have stopped declaring. There is a drought of clarity, not because heaven is silent, but because we've chosen echo chambers over prophetic utterance. We've traded boldness for acceptance. We've sacrificed distinction on the altar of being liked. But when you trade your voice for comfort, you also trade your impact. You cannot change what you're afraid to confront. You cannot heal what you won't speak into. You cannot deliver a generation while repeating their bondage in a prettier tone. This is not the season to echo soft religion. This is not the hour to mimic powerless preaching. This is not the generation that needs more recycled opinions. This is the generation that needs raw, refined spirit, led, bold, holy, fire-saturated, kingdom-anchored voices. Voices that shake atmospheres. Voices that carry conviction. Voices that declare the word of the Lord even if it costs them position, friendship, applause, or open doors. Because true voices are not built for applause. They are built for assignment. If you're still wondering whether you're called to speak, let me tell you this. Your survival is proof. If God brought you through it, you must say something. If he revealed it to you, you must declare something. If you've seen it, known it, discerned it, and lived through it, you don't have the luxury of silence anymore. You must be a voice, not of echo, but of essence. Not of trend, but of truth. Not of fear, but of fire. The world is not waiting for another echo. The world is dying for a voice. The kind of voice that carries oil. The kind of voice that calls Lazarus out of tombs. The kind of voice that speaks to dry bones and watches them live. The kind of voice that wakes up destiny in the weary, speaks courage to the afraid, and ignites hunger in the satisfied. That's who you are. That's what you carry. That's what the enemy fears. And that's what the earth is groaning for. If you don't speak, the stones will cry out. That is not poetry. It is a warning. It is not poetic symbolism. It is prophetic reality. When Jesus entered Jerusalem and the crowds began to praise him, the religious leaders told him to silence the people. But Jesus turned to them and said, "If they keep quiet, the stones will cry out." That was not exaggeration, that was divine principle. God will be glorified. Truth will be proclaimed. Purpose will find a mouth to move through. And if you choose to remain silent, heaven will find another vessel, even if that vessel is a rock. God has always used voices to shake nations. He did not send plagues into Egypt without first sending a voice. He did not split the Red Sea without a voice to raise a staff. He did not bring fire down from heaven without a voice to pray it down. He did not walk into battle without a prophet to declare victory before the first sword was drawn. God never moves in silence, he moves through sound. Through voices that say what others fear, declare what others hide, and shout what others whisper. And when a person refuses to be that voice, the mission doesn't die, it moves. You may think your silence keeps you safe, but it actually risks your relevance. Destiny does not wait for your comfort. God's plan does not pause until you're ready. If you keep quiet in the moment of decision, your assignment will pass to someone else who's willing to speak when you weren't. Esther had to learn this the hard way. When she was hesitant to speak to the king, Mordecai told her plainly, "If you remain silent at this time, deliverance will arise from somewhere else. But who knows if you were born for such a time as this?" That wasn't encouragement. That was a prophetic warning. Silence forfeits significance. Hesitation can cancel a moment you were created for. We often assume that delay is harmless, that someone else will eventually say what needs to be said. But calling does not get reassigned without consequence. When you reject the voice inside of you, you also reject the part of God's plan that had your name on it. There are seasons when silence becomes rebellion. Not because you spoke evil, but because you withheld what was holy. And if you don't speak, the stones, the unqualified, the unexpected, the overlooked, will rise up and speak in your place. Purpose demands volume. You cannot fulfill destiny in whispers. You cannot impact generations in silence. Heaven's agenda requires clarity. It requires proclamation. It requires sound. The same way God spoke the world into existence, he now sends his people to speak his will into atmospheres, into regions, into families, into systems. The power is not just in knowing truth. The power is in speaking it. Life and death are in the power of the tongue, not in the power of thoughts, feelings, or intentions. You must speak. You must understand silence is not a sanctuary. It is a graveyard. It's where unspoken revelation is buried. It's where callings go to rot. It's where courage decays while people applaud your peacefulness. Silence may protect your image, but it kills your impact. It may preserve your comfort, but it poisons your legacy. You can either be liked or be useful. But in this generation, it is rare to be both. The world is loud. Deception is loud. Confusion is loud. Culture is screaming its doctrines. Media is evangelizing its ideologies 24/7. The question is not whether sound will fill the air. The question is whose sound will dominate. If the righteous remain silent, the stones will rise. If the appointed remain afraid, the unexpected will step up. God will never be without a voice. But whether it's yours or someone else's is up to you. You must be careful not to confuse God's patience with his dependency. He does not need you. He chose you. But if you refuse, the assignment will continue without you. God loves you enough to invite you into history, but he is sovereign enough to complete his will without delay. There are Davids in the fields right now, ready to take Saul's place. There are Elishas plowing behind oxen, waiting for Elijah to pass the mantle. There are voices in caves being prepared to emerge, and they are not held back by fear of opinion. They are not concerned with being liked. They are consumed with obedience. And if you hesitate too long, you may live to see someone else walking in the purpose you silenced. If you don't speak, someone will. If you don't declare what you saw, God will show it to someone who won't hesitate. If you don't release what's burning in your bones, he'll find another vessel that isn't afraid of the fire. You were not just chosen to know. You were chosen to declare. You were not just called to observe. You were called to release. Your voice was never meant to be an accessory to your faith. It is a weapon in the hand of God. But a weapon never used is as useless as one that was never forged. This is not the hour for hesitation. This is not the season to wait for someone more polished, more popular, or more articulate. God uses availability, not perfection. He uses surrendered mouths. Not ones that have all the answers, but ones that are willing to be filled. Don't let insecurity rob you of your sound. Don't let comparison paralyze your obedience. Don't let fear of offense make you mute when you were born to declare the word of the Lord. Heaven is waiting for your voice. Creation is groaning for the manifestation of the sons and daughters of God. This is not the time to echo. This is the time to announce. This is not the time to hide in the crowd. This is the moment to rise. Because if you don't, the stones will. The untrained, the overlooked, the ones you thought weren't qualified. And when they speak, don't be surprised. Because heaven will never let the truth die in silence. And you will know deep within your spirit, not with guilt, but with holy conviction. That was supposed to be me. My friends, silence is not safety. Silence is not wisdom. Silence is not spiritual maturity. Silence is surrender in disguise. And when the righteous remain silent, they give the enemy permission to speak unchecked. You were not placed in this generation to spectate while darkness dominates. You were planted here to disturb it. You were not born to observe culture. You were born to transform it. Heaven did not anoint you for silence, it anointed you for influence. An influence that refuses to speak is rebellion in religious clothing. There is too much purpose in you to stay quiet. Too much revelation in you to be hidden. Too much fire in your bones to live like a flicker. The enemy doesn't fear your presence, he fears your voice. And if you refuse to speak, you are not just delaying your destiny. You are denying someone else's deliverance. You carry answers, you carry insight, you carry keys. And God did not give you those keys to lock your mouth. He gave them to unlock chains on others. The days of silence are over. The age of blending in is finished. This is the hour where voices must rise. Not echoes, but original, heaven-born, spirit-filled voices that release clarity in chaos, order in confusion, and light in deep darkness. Do not wait for another opportunity. Do not delay your sound. There are lives on the other side of your obedience. There are futures waiting on your courage. If you stay silent, the stones will cry out. But why let rocks do what you were born to carry? This is your assignment. This is your mantle. Speak now. Speak boldly. Speak with fire. Because your voice, not your silence, is the weapon God gave you to change the world.